My name is Damien van Elderwegen. I'm the SPLD coordinator at Chiltern High School. This session is how is dyslexia supported at Chiltern High School, and it was originally recorded on Wednesday, the 29th of June. I'm redoing it because we had a few technical issues that day. I'll go over my role in a few minutes, but yeah, thanks for joining us. What I'm going to try and go over today is what dyslexia is, how it can impact on learning, how it can be identified, what tools and strategies we use to support students with dyslexia at Chiltern High School, and where to find more information and advice. And this is the team. This is the Access and Achievement team at Chiltern High School. This department is the Learning Support Department at Chiltern High School. We have Sarah Wickstead at the top there, who is an assistant head teacher, director, the sort of over director of Access and Achievement. Our SENCO, Shelley Stapley, and assistant SENCO, Anna Dawson. And then Kevin Pilling, who is responsible for years 7, 8 and 9, the SEN students at school there. And we have Neil Reedy, who is actually not going to be with us for much longer, but he is responsible for access arrangements. Emma Holdship, who is responsible for assessments and interventions, and Andy Richards is responsible for new SEN referrals, and Steph Hardiman, whose responsibility for the Think Room, the therapeutic inclusion room, and referrals to there. And there's me at the bottom, responsibility for specific learning difficulties and exam access arrangements. Okay. So let's start off with, very quickly, what is dyslexia? The word dyslexia is a Greek word. It's been around for hundreds of years. Some people think it's just about reading, writing numeracy, but it can affect your life in many ways. Now, I know that many of you will have a child at school identified as having learning difficulties, specific learning difficulties, and so it's likely that many of you will know this answer. What is dyslexia? So please forgive me for the next 10, 15 minutes if that's the case. However, so that I can get on to looking at how dyslexia is supported at Chiltern High School, I'll more or less be simply reading through the slides fairly quickly, but remember, don't try and get everything down. You can go back over the slides at any time to take down in any of the information that you might want to reread. Okay, specific learning difficulties. Specific learning difficulties, or SPLDs, affect the way that information is learned and processed. Dyslexia is one of the categories of SPLD. The SPLDs are neurological rather than psychological, and they usually run in families and occur independently of intelligence. That which basically just means you can be at least average, if not higher, and still have specific learning difficulties. They can have significant impacts on education and learning and on the acquisition of literacy skills in particular. So what is dyslexia? Neurodiversity and the family of overlapping specific learning difficulties. Although there's others, these are some of the most common SPLD categories. Neurodiversity in the family of overlapping specific learning difficulties. Before we actually have a look at some of them, neurodiversity is a fairly new term. It encompasses all specific learning difficulties, many of which overlap and therefore more often than not, do co-occur with other SPLDs. Unlike developmental disabilities, learning disabilities are strictly neurological in nature and are not related to intelligence levels, as I've just said. Okay. So dyslexia is the main one we're going to be looking at today. It's the specific learning difficulty specifically to do with learning language and literacy. But that said, all of them do in one way or another affect how we learn, how children can learn literacy skills. Dyscalculia is one that's often thought of to do with maths and numeracy, and it's a specific and persistent difficulty as well as dyslexia, but this time in understanding numbers, which can lead to a diverse range of difficulties with mathematics. It'll be unexpected in relation to age, level of education and experience, and occurs across all ages and abilities. Dyspraxia, or DCD, developmental coordination disorder, is a condition affecting physical coordination. It causes a child to perform less well than expected in daily activities for their age and appear to move clumsily. Okay, so dysgraphia I've linked closer to dyslexia because there's more obvious connections to dyslexia, but like I said, they can all overlap in with any of the other SPLDs. Dysgraphia is an SPLD, that's a category that affects written expression. The word literally means difficulty with writing, whereas dyslexia is difficulty with words. This is specifically with writing. Dysgraphia can appear in different ways, such as difficulties with spelling, grammar, handwriting, and trouble organizing thoughts on paper. Attention deficit disorder, or ADD, or attention hyperactivity deficit disorder. The term commonly used to describe symptoms of inattention, distractibility, and poor working memory is ADHD, which in itself also includes symptoms of hyperactivity and impulsivity. Both ADD and ADD are included in the medical diagnosis of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. This one and the next one I've grouped on their own, well, I've put on their own. Autism spectrum disorder, ASD, or also known as autism spectrum condition, ASC, also known as in a number of other ways, and Asperger's or Asperger's syndrome is used often to refer to the same thing, to the same condition. Autism is a neurological disorder that affects how people process certain types of information. It can affect learning, although it's not in itself a learning disability. However, also being strictly neurological in nature, it isn't related to intelligence levels, as I said at the beginning. It can affect language skills, both when speaking and listening. And finally, for this slide, although there are a good number of other categories associated with specific learning difficulties, but this isn't a specific learning difficulty. It's not a neurological issue. It's a separate, it's also known as Ehlers syndrome. It's a separate visual perceptual disorder, which often occurs alongside other dyslexic tendencies. It's not a consequence of phonological differences associated with dyslexia, but it's often perceived as being so. Reading through a coloured overlay, though, that changes the colour of the page is a frequently successful method of addressing this syndrome. So rather than spending a lot of money on diagnosis and tinted glasses or just going and having an investigation, often just a coloured overlay will do. That said, if it is any more severe, then going to see a behavioural optometrist is a good idea. Okay, so concentrating, however, on dyslexia tonight. Recent research shows that roughly as many females as males may be affected. And we're going to look at that again in a minute, that previous point, because that might be the case that there as many as each other are affected, but it's not necessarily as many that we know about, because there'll be more boys or males that are diagnosed or referred than females. It can't be cured, but over time, different coping strategies are learned and are effective. Dyslexia particularly affects the handling of symbolic information, especially written language. Because of the high level of co-occurrence, between the different SPLDs, as I showed on the previous slide. It's important to understand that each profile is as unique to the individual as it is to the different category of SPLD. And so dyslexia itself can appear in a variety of ways, such as these are a lot of the areas that the specific learning difficulty category of dyslexia can manifest itself in. And the main categories are with spelling, writing, listening, memory, intelligence, planning, visual processing, speed, direction, behavior, speaking. And it breaks down on this slide the individual, some of the individual areas, points that it does so in particular. Again, go back and have a look at this slide when you finish looking at the video, because it's quite interesting. And it's not that your child or anyone that you know who has dyslexia will have all of these issues, but they will have some of them, at least some of them, and to a level where it's impacting on their teaching, their learning. What causes dyslexia? Okay. Looking at reading in particular, the dyslexic reader on the left there is showing that the frontal lobe is only used. When reading, the dyslexic brain relies on the left frontal lobe, whereas strong readers rely on areas towards the back of the brain. Those with dyslexia aren't tapping into this high-powered area, but they're compensating by using the front of the cerebrum, which isn't as effective. Okay, so looking at another diagram of the picture of the brain, this helps to explain how some of the other characteristics of people with dyslexia are commonly perceived, and which typically quite often happen. Children who or individuals who are efficient readers, who efficiently learn literacy, use the left-hand side of the brain more so in learning literacy, whereas the right-hand side of the brain is more of a creative side. So it's sort of the non-structured side. Now with dyslexic learners, they overutilize the right hand side of the brain because of the inefficiency of using the left hand side of the brain to do what it's supposed to do when learning literacy with a neurotypical learner, for instance. Neurotypical is someone without specific learning difficulties in particular. So what they're suggesting, and what is believed widely, is over time dyslexics tap portions of the right hemisphere to supplement their reading skills. However, these areas aren't as efficient for reading, so they end up as slow but accurate readers, using a lot more brain effort for less results. So they might find really use their creative side, exercise their creative side of their brain, but in just reading and writing, it's quite tiring because they're having to use a much longer neurological route to achieve the same results as an efficient reader or writer. Okay. Many believe that using the more creative right hemisphere of the brain, however, to solve problems and come up with ideas is the reason that dyslexia can be an aid to success, because they are more able to tap into those creative sides and use them in providing solutions to situations or coming up with ideas for things. And so some of the ideas here, some of the examples here, sorry, are writers, successful writers, entrepreneurs, inventors, politicians, and artists. And here's some of the strengths that are quite often associated with people with specific learning difficulties and dyslexia. Creativity, thinking laterally and making unexpected connections. Problem-solving skills, seeing the big picture. Good visual skills, thinking easily in 3D or thinking outside the box. For good verbal skills, good social skills. Okay, the dyslexic learner may learn well when they can do these things. So again, tapping into the strengths to this time look at how we can help them learn. If we make learning personal, meaningful connections for them to secure things in their long-term memory, that helps. Remember patterns rather than sequences. Remember landmarks rather than directions. Think holistically, all at once, rather than step by step. See the big picture. Learn literacy skills through multi-sensory methods, and learn by experience rather than being told. Okay, we're going to do this really quickly, but some of these slides so that I can get through, like I said. But did you know that researchers have found that self-made millionaires are 4 times more likely to be dyslexic than the rest of the population? Apparently, according to Marianne, the founder of the Homeschooling with Dyslexia website. While school years can be a difficult time for dyslexic learners, their exceptional gifts and talents have made them some of the most successful people in the world outside the classroom. So while some people sometimes may look at dyslexia as a disability, it really is a learning difference that's accompanied by some impressive strengths, such as a lot of these. And again, come back and have a look at this slide. They are really interesting, and these areas can be influenced in a very positive way through having dyslexia. Okay, and here's some famous people who are known to have had dyslexia or have dyslexia, and which is thought to have really aided their abilities, their thinking of ideas, creativity. Just to name a few, they're not all. Jamie Oliver, Richard Branson, Jack Nicholson, Einstein, John Lennon, Harrison Ford, Whoopi Goldberg, Leonardo da Vinci, Churchill, John F. Kennedy. Okay, some impressive people there. Okay, so neurological effects associated with dyslexia. As well as the potential gift of dyslexia, however, it is of course important to know the resulting processing issues created by these neurological causes and what their effects are on teaching and learning. So visual processing is an individual's ability to understand and navigate written symbols based on how the brain interprets visual information. Auditory processing is an individual's ability to understand the basic sounds of language, phonemes, sounds of letters, and groups of letters based on how the brain interprets auditory information. Phonological processing is the use of the sounds of language, i.e. phonemes, to process spoken and written language. Executive function is a collection of a lot of those functions, a set of mental skills that include working memory, used for learning, working, and managing daily life. For example, focusing, following directions, and handling emotions. Memory, the capacity for storing and retrieving information, the processes involved, encoding, storing, and retrieval. And processing speed at the bottom there, which is an overall thing. Any of these issues, or none of those issues, plus processing speed will create the potential for dyslexia. Processing speed is the rate at which information is processed by the brain, which affects students in many ways. Different variations in strengths or weaknesses in these processing areas can be said to create 2 distinct types of dyslexia: dysphonetic dyslexia and dyseidetic dyslexia. Dysphonetic dyslexia, a person diagnosed with this has difficulty, or thought to have this, has difficulty connecting sounds to symbols and might have a hard time sounding out words, and spelling mistakes would show a very poor grasp of phonics. This is also sometimes called auditory dyslexia. Dysphonic dyslexia is also sometimes called auditory dyslexia because it relates to the way the person processes the sounds of language. On the other hand, dyseidetic dyslexia, a person with this generally has a good grasp of phonetic concepts, but great difficulty with whole word recognition and spelling. And this type of dyslexia might also be labeled as surface or visual or orthographic dyslexia. Again, go back to any of these if you'd like to reread through them. Whichever type of dyslexia, however, is that's experienced, the area primarily affected with both of those main types, and so the most commonly observed consequences is difficulty with literacy, hence dyslexia. Furthermore, although reading's definitely affected, spelling difficulties are most often the most difficult to address. And the reason for that, what does spelling require? It requires recall. Reading requires recognition, and recall is harder than recognition, according to many. I.e., in order to spell, you need to be able to say the word, sequence the sounds which make up the word, recall the letter or groups of letters which make those sounds, write the letters correctly, sequence the letters, visually picture the word to check if you're right, and all this needs to be pulled back from long-term memory, so to know that the word so that is there, so that your hand is automatically writing it without thinking. Okay, dyslexia affects many neurological processes, including the speed of processing, the short-term and working memory, their organization, following, understanding long and complicated instructions, and their ability to remember sequences, and much more. So it's not just literacy, but it's the reason they have difficulty with literacy, or a lot of the reasons. Therefore, dyslexia doesn't only affect a person's ability to spell and read. People with dyslexia generally have poor short-term working memories, and this can lead to difficulties with the following: instruction messages, sense of direction, facts and formulae, copying from the whiteboard, not OHPs these days, or books, dictation, spelling. Around 10% of the UK population, roughly 6.3 million people, currently have some form of dyslexia, 4% severely so. In high school, this equates to, on average, between roughly 150 students affected at high school this size and 60 severely so, 30 pupils affected in each year group at a high school this size, 12 severely so, or 3 pupils in each class affected and 1 pupil severely. Chiltern High School, currently we have 123 students officially identified with specific learning difficulties. This equates to 31.5% of all SEN students at Chiltern High School with specific learning difficulties. 8.1% of all the students at Chiltern High School is the percentage, sorry, of all students at Chiltern High School with SPLD. Over the last 50 years, research has consistently reported that around 2/3 to 3/4 of children and young people referred for SEN support are male. So, as I was mentioning before, even though it seems that it's believed that it can affect males as well as equally as much as females, it's the boys that are referred most frequently, most commonly. How might a student with SPLD at Chiltern High School be identified and subsequently supported? A teacher, parent, or even the child might find that they're experiencing difficulties and want to have themselves investigated. Teachers at Chiltern High School receive relevant SEND training at a minimum of once a year, as well as with many further small advice offerings, so that they might be aware of particular telltale signs in order to use knowledge from their regular SEN training to support and differentiate as appropriate, and when difficulties persist, use their knowledge of these signs to refer to us when they feel necessary. These signs might present themselves in many forms, as I show over the next few slides. The following points are what you might expect from a child with dyslexia. I have difficulties reading, writing, spelling. I have some difficulties with maths. Sometimes I find it difficult to concentrate. I get letters or numbers mixed up. I have problems meeting deadlines or being on time. I can be quite forgetful. I have good and bad days, but I'm really good at subjects like art, music, drama, sports, building, designing. Again, these aren't definitely with every child with dyslexia, but these are some of the common thoughts, most frequent things that we hear from children with dyslexia. The following points are what you might expect a child with dyslexia to had said to or about them. You write things backwards. Where does the book start? Your brain malfunctions. I think God's put my brain in upside down. He knows it in his head, but he can't get it down on paper. You mix up B and D. I was always put with the dunces stuffed in the dustbin left to myself. He knows what day it is. He never knows what day it is, sorry. Is yesterday the day after tomorrow? So this is the referral process for specific learning difficulties at Chiltern High School. Once a student's been referred to the Access and Achievement team with dyslexic characteristics, observation file note pro forma are sent round robin to the student's teachers. The specific learning difficulties screening is undergone in Access and Achievement using screening software we use by Lucid Research, which looks at those areas, those cognitive areas that I was covered earlier, plus the main literacy areas. Then, following that, recommendations of reasonable adjustments and exam access arrangements, if appropriate, are made and set up. And then after that, advice is sent out to staff, and staff add information to their Who is in my class or WIIMC forms, which we'll look at in a few minutes. A report is then sent to parents or carers, and specific learning difficulties findings of information are added to the Chiltern High School Educational Needs Database and this, or the SEN register, and the student's pupil passport, again, something we're going to look at in a second. Both are available to all Chiltern High School staff working with the student. I've put down here a note which has already been asked about a parent, by a parent, why we don't do this, but discussion with students regarding the findings if requested by parents. Now the thing is, I do speak to the children about whether what assistance might they find the best, whether it's in an exam, and maybe it's like I'm suggesting they get extra time or rest breaks, but and if the child's inquisitive, really wants to know, I'll speak to them about the results of the report. But I've found in the past that parents would like to approach the subject first with the child, and then they can request that I speak to, and I'm more than happy to speak to the child about the results. But in the past, it sometimes comes better from the parents who know them best, just to open the conversation. But when the results come through and the report comes through, just make a request to myself at Access and Achievement, and of course I'll speak to the child. I have no problem with that. How do we support the students with dyslexia? Again, so just very clearly saying what I've just been saying. How is information shared with teachers at Chiltern High School? Whole school training with dyslexia, minimum once annually. At minimum, that is. Pupil passports and Who's in my class teaching assistant document. Okay, well, we're going to look at those in a few minutes, but these are just some websites that have some ideas about how you can help your dyslexic child at home, or children with specific learning difficulties, that I check quite fairly regularly to see if they're still up and running. And these are a few. There are a lot more, but yeah, come back and have a quick look at this slide if you get a chance to, and try some of them out. And these are some others, but these are all to do with touch typing and learning, mainly learning how to use the computer keyboard, because a common issue experienced by children with specific learning difficulties is the ability to write clearly at an appropriate rate and not become over fatigued or all of the above. The most popular suggestion by professional dyslexia associations such as the BDA, the Dyslexia Action, or PATOS, is in order to address all these issues is the use of assistive technology, and in particular that of typing. And so many of these are online touch typing courses, some free, some aren't, but some are actually aimed at just children with dyslexia. The more the type practice typing, even if they never get to a point where they can just not look at the keyboard, the more you type in, just the same as any skill, the better and more efficient you become. And I do highly recommend, if that's one of their issues, recording work through writing, that they learn, that they practice typing. Okay, and this is from another website that I use a lot, that I highly recommend. It's a US website called understood.org. The idea is, this is on this one is from an article on there called 8 Study Tips to Help Middle Schoolers with Dyslexia. Figure out how much time they need to study. This is something for them to learn, to start to do. Bring in visual elements, add images to flashcards, prepare for short answer tests in advance, have him or her read or play notes aloud, try software to help organize study notes, encourage him or her to join a study group, and remind them to ask about the directions. Okay, going back to the documents that I mentioned earlier, this is the first of them, the pupil passports that the teachers put together so that they know to, the SEN department put together so that the teachers can access it easily and have a look at the areas of strength, but also areas where the children might need some help, and focus on, in particular for their literacy or maths, or how much time it takes them to work. So again, if you'd like to have a look at how these passports, this is an example of one of them. The passport is accessed by the teacher, and it's put together by the Access and Achievement Department. And as you can see there, there's descriptions of what the specific combination of cognitive issues, and how you can best support, how the teacher can best support them. And this is the Who's in My Class teaching assistant document. And this is a teaching assistant version, but there's one for the teacher. The teacher puts together both of these versions, and it's so that at a glance they can have a look and see who's got what what SEN. And on here I've got not just SPLD dyslexia, but on here there are children obviously with autistic spectrum condition, and then SEMH, which is social emotional mental health, ADHD that we covered earlier. And here's some of the areas that the children are focusing on, and the strategies that we've suggested or that we've discussed with the children to help them progress or work on. And these are some of the areas that we suggest to teachers. That some of the there's more, but these are some of the areas that some of the advice that we give to teachers. Providing handouts to stick into books rather than copy, text or handwriting on the whiteboard, make sure it's clear and large enough to see. Information presented in a range of ways, pictures, flowcharts, through drama, cards to sort, etc. Word list, words banks, colour-coded and organised systematically for ease of location. That's texts and independence, and a few others there. And on the seating and grouping on the right, group according to task requirements, not literacy level, seat away from distractions, and check that pupil is sitting in good light and can see you and the board easily. A few other ways students with specific learning difficulties are supported at Chiltern High School. Key information and homework all shared on Teams, information repeated and given in different formats, academic mentoring from the year group team, form tutor support with exam timetables and revision timetables, and a few dyslexia support resources and access and achievements. So these are some of the things we use, and we've offered to children who have specific difficulties in these areas where it is so pronounced that we've tried all the different options where children may have difficulty following the words when they're reading, and reading rules help, which also double as colour overlays if they have visual stress issues. Pen grips if they have difficulty holding a pen. These are just some of them, by the way. Timeout pass if they need rest breaks because of the cognitive load, for instance, that their specific learning difficulties are causing them when they're learning. Assistive technology is any of these technical, electronic aids such as laptops, reading rulers, reading pens, sorry. And there's some software that we're introducing at the moment called Docs Plus, which is a word processor with a difference. It's basically like predictive text, but as a word processor. So the words come as they start, and then the student find it easier to, instead of just typing without this, to choose the word and go on to the next. The more they use that, the better they get at doing it. It takes promotes the idea of independence while still providing that support. Okay, so at Chiltern High School, we have asked a number of the students that we know have dyslexia or specific learning difficulties, what they find difficult about school. Recently I've asked this, and what they find helps at school. This is a number of year 10s, 9s, 8s students, and the year 7, I think. It takes me longer to process. So, sorry, answering the question, what do you find difficult about school? It takes me longer to process the words. I don't understand some words, and I'm too embarrassed to ask what they mean. My handwriting deteriorates over time. I can't understand what a lot of the words mean. Last year I found it hard when we weren't in sets. The work was too hard, the teachers less helpful. And when I asked for help, it happened more than they would snap back at me. I think because they had, this was at a particularly difficult point when there was a lot of the children in mixed ability classes. And I don't think this happened very often, but during tests I can't remember what words mean. If teachers spell things out to me, I can't write it down, and I take a lot longer to write than everyone else. And some of the answers to what do you find helps at school: teachers giving me handouts, access and achievement, have good communication with my teachers regarding my dyslexia. When I get extra time, I know that I have to rush it and I can't go, and I can go back over my work. It helps if I can get on with my, it helps if I get on with my teacher and we have good communication. My teacher always tells me what words mean when I forget. Coloured overlays really help. Having access to a laptop whenever I need it. My allowances in exams really help. My maths teacher making sure I've got enough work to help me catch up if I need to. And I like us being in sets. The work itself is easier than it was last year. The teachers are more helpful, and that's how that was very recently that I got that student voice. Okay, so places to find further help. These are some general, quite effective places to start. British Dyslexia Association, the BDA. Contact the Access and Achievement Team. Information, advice and support, IAS Manchester, and the local offer. And we'll have a quick look at that. And that's the local authorities offer, which is all the activities, services, advice and support offered by numerous organisations across the city of Manchester for children and young people up to 25 years old who have special educational needs or disabilities. It includes things to do, places to go, rights, health, money, childcare, education, support groups, short breaks and independent living. There's lots of ways to find out about Manchester's local offer. Okay, and that's it. Thank you very much for your time. I've finished there with a sort of a handbook it's one of the pieces of advice I give on some of my reports, which illustrates how you can use the 5-finger rule to choose just the right ability level of reading book. If when you're asking your child to read a page, if you can ask them to put a finger up whenever they find a difficulty, and you can do it if they read it out to you, they can't read a word or they need help with it before they can understand it. If they only do that once or twice on one page, then the book's too easy for them. 2 to 3 times, it's just right. 4 or 5 or more fingers, then it's too hard book. But yes, it's just a little way of saying goodbye, but also quite a useful little tip to remember, quite an easy to remember way of doing that. Please, this was done, sorry, I've recorded this a few days after I did, put the presentation out. But if you'd like to ask any further questions, then this is my email address at the bottom. I'll get back to you separately as soon as I can. And thanks very much. And this is a quote from Einstein. Sorry, I'm not sure if it was him that said it, but obviously Einstein had specific learning difficulties. Everybody is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it's stupid. And there's my email address again. Thanks for your time. Goodbye.